but as far as I could determine, this was never officially acknowledged. In December, a photograph of 2 UFOs over Taormina, Sicily, appeared in many newspapers. The picture showed 3 men standing on a bridge, with a 4th running up with a camera. All were intently watching 2 disc-shaped objects. The photo looked good, but there was one flaw. The men weren't looking at the UFOs. They were looking off to the right of them. I'm inclined to agree with Captain Hardin of Blue Book. The photographer just fouled up on his double exposure. Sightings spread across southern Europe, and at the end of October, the Yugoslav government expressed official interest. Belgrade newspapers said that a thoughtful inquiry would be set up, since reports had come from control tower operators, weather stations, and hundreds of farmers. But the part of the statement that swung the most weight was, "Scientists in astronomical observatories have seen strange objects with their own eyes." During 1954 and the early part of 1955, my friends in Europe tried to keep me up to date on all of the better reports, but this soon approached a full-time job. Airline pilots saw them, radar picked them up, and military pilots chased them. The press took sides, and the controversy that had plagued the U.S. since 1947 bloomed forth in all its confusion. An ex-Air Chief Marshal in the RAF, Lord Dowding, went to bat for the UFOs. The Netherlands Air Chief of Staff said they can't be. Herman Oberth, the father of the German rocket development, said that the UFOs were definitely interplanetary vehicles. In Belgium, a senator put the screws on the Secretary of Defense. He wanted an answer. The Secretary of Defense questioned the idea that the saucers were real and said that the military wasn't officially interested. In France, a member of Parliament received a different answer. The French military was interested. The French General Staff had set up a committee to study UFO reports. In Italy, Claire Booth Luce, American ambassador to Italy, said that she had seen a UFO and had no idea what it could be. Halfway around the world, in Australia, the UFOs were busy too. At Canberra Airport, the pilot of an RAAF Hawker Sea Fury and a ground radar station teamed up to get enough data to make an excellent radar visual report. In early 1955, the flap began to die down about as rapidly as it had flared up, but it had left its mark. Many more believers. Even the highly respected British aviation magazine Aeroplane had something to say. One of the editors took a long, hard look at the overall UFO picture and concluded, "Really, old chaps, I don't know." Probably the most unique part of the whole European flap was the fact that the Iron Curtain countries were having their own private flap. The first indications came in October 1954, when Romanian newspapers blamed the United States for launching a drive to induce a flying saucer psychosis in their country. The next month, the Hungarian government hauled an expert up in front of the microphone so that he could explain to the populace that UFOs don't really exist, because all flying saucer reports originate in the bourgeois countries, where they are invented by the capitalist warmongers with a view to drawing the people's attention away from their economic difficulties. Next, the USSR itself took up the cry along the same lines when the voice of the Soviet Army, the newspaper Red Star, denounced the UFOs as, you guessed it, capitalist propaganda. In 1955, the UFOs were still there because the day before the all-important May Day celebration, a day when the Soviet radio and TV are normally crammed with programs plugging with glory of Mother Russia to get the peasants in the mood for the next day, a member of the Soviet Academy of Sciences had to get on the air to calm the people's fears. He left out Wall Street and Dulles this time. UFOs just don't exist. It was interesting to note that during the whole Iron Curtain flap, not one sighting or complimentary comment about the UFOs was made over the radio or in the newspapers. Yet the flap continued. The reports were obviously being passed on by word of mouth. This fact seemed to negate the theory that if the newspaper reporters and newscasters would give up, the UFOs would go away. The people in Russia were obviously seeing something. While the European flap was in progress, the UFOs weren't entirely neglecting the United States. The number of reports that were coming into Project Blue Book were below average, but there were reports. Many of them would definitely be classed as good, but the best was a report from a photo reconnaissance B-29 crew that encountered a UFO almost over Dayton. About 11 o'clock a.m. on May 24, 1954, an RB-29 equipped with some new aerial cameras took off from Wright Field, one of the two airfields that make up Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and headed toward the Air Force's photographic test range in Indiana. At exactly 12 noon, they were at about 15 miles northwest of Dayton. A major, a photo officer, was in the nose seat of the 29. All of the gun sights and the bomb sight in the nose had been taken out, so it was like sitting in a large picture window, except you just can't get this kind of a view anyplace else. The major was enjoying it. He was leaning forward, looking down, when he saw an extremely bright, circular-shaped object under and a little behind the airplane. It was so bright that it seemed to have a mirror finish. He couldn't tell how far below him it was, but he was sure that it wasn't any higher than 6,000 feet above the ground, and it was traveling fast, faster than the B-29. It took only about 6 seconds to cross a section of land, which meant that it was going about 600 miles an hour. The major called the crew and told them about the UFO, but neither the pilot nor the co-pilot could see it because it was now directly under the B-29. The pilot was just in the process of telling him that he was crazy when one of the scanners in an aft blister called in. He and the other scanner could also see the UFO. Being a photo ship, the RB-29 had cameras, loaded cameras, so the logical thing to do would be to take a picture. But during a UFO sighting, logic sometimes gets shoved into the background. In this case, however, it didn't, and the major reached down, punched the button on the intervalometer, and the big vertical camera in the aft section of the airplane clicked off a photo before the UFO sped away. The photo showed a circular-shaped blob of light exactly as the major had described it to the RB-29 crew. It didn't show any details of the UFO because the UFO was too bright. It was completely overexposed on the negative. The circular shape wasn't sharp either. It had fuzzy edges, but this could have been due to two things: its extreme brightness or the fact that it was high, close to the RB-29 and out of focus. There was no way of telling exactly how high it was, but if it were at 6,000 feet, as the major estimated, it would have been about 125 feet in diameter. Working with people from the photo lab at Wright-Patterson, Captain Hardin from Project Blue Book carried out one of the most complete investigations in UFO history. They checked aircraft flights, rephotographed the area from high and low altitude to see if they could pick up something on the ground that could have been reflecting light, and made a minute ground search of the area. They found absolutely nothing that could explain the round blob of light, and the incident went down as an unknown. Like all good unknown UFO reports, there are as many opinions as to what the bright blob of light could have been as there are people who've seen the photo. Some kind of light phenomenon is the frequent opinion of those who don't believe. They point out that there is no shadow of any kind of a circular object showing on the ground. No shadow, nothing solid. But if you care to take the time, you can show that if the object, assuming that this is what it was above 4,000 feet, the shadow would fall out of the picture. Then all you get is a blank look from the light phenomenon theorists. With the sighting from the RB-29 and the photograph, all of the other UFO reports that Blue Book has collected, and all of those that came out of the European flap, the big question, the key question, is what have the last 2 years of UFO activity brought out? Have there been any important developments? Some good reports have come in, and the Air Force is sitting on them. During 1954, they received some 450 reports, and once again, July was the peak month. In the first half of 1955, they had 189. But I can assure you that these reports add nothing more as far as proof is concerned. The quality of the reports has improved, but they still offer nothing more than the same circumstantial evidence that we presented to the panel of scientists in early 1953. There have been no reports in which the speed or altitude of a UFO has been measured. There have been no reliable photographs that show any details of a UFO, and there is no hardware. There is still no real proof. So a public statement that was made in 1952 still holds true. The possibility of the existence of interplanetary craft has never been denied by the Air Force, but UFO reports offer absolutely no authentic evidence that such interplanetary spacecraft do exist. But with the UFO, what is lacking in proof is always made up for in opinions. To get a qualified opinion, I wrote to a friend, Frederick C. Durant. Mr. Durant, who is presently the director of a large Army Ordnance Test Station, is also a past president of the American Rocket Society and president of the International Astronautical Federation. For those who are not familiar with these organizations, the American Rocket Society is an organization established to promote interest and research in spaceflight and lists as its members practically every prominent scientist and engineer in the professional fields allied to aeronautics. The International Astronautical Federation is a worldwide federation of such societies. Mr. Durant has spent many hours studying UFO reports in the Project Blue Book files. Scientists the world over, scientists who are doing research and formulating the plans for spaceflight. I asked him what he'd heard about the UFOs during the past several years and what he thought about them. This was his reply. This past summer at the annual Congress of the IAF at Innsbruck,